Okay, well, I am Carmen Van Bianchi, and we've got Becca Wendell and Anna Makowitz. And yeah, good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here. We're excited to introduce ourselves, and we were really happy when Met How at Home asked us if we'd like to do this because as fellow residents of this beautiful and amazing valley, we think that you'll be really interested in the work we're doing to help conserve the wildlife that make the Met House such a amazing and interesting and wonderful place to live. So we have a presentation with lots of pictures and fun stuff, that we think you will enjoy. So I think Anna is going to start screen sharing so that you can see our pictures.
Yeah, if we're ready for that, we can get rolling. It's nice to see, I see several people that we know. So, and some of you might have seen this presentation before. So we're happy that you're here. Let's see. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, Carmen's going to kick it off, I think. So I'm going to mute myself again, but I'll be pushing buttons. So Carmen, if I mess anything up, just holler at me. But
okay, sounds good. Okay, all right. Well, so Anna, Becca, and I are each wildlife biologists, meaning we conduct studies to answer questions about wildlife, such as what habitat does a particular species use, or how many mule deer are in our local Met How population, or really any number of questions that can help us understand, really most importantly, that can help us protect and conserve our wildlife. So the inception of Home Range came from the experiences and the lessons that Anna, Becca, and I have absorbed along each of our career paths as wildlife biologists. So we've each worked as biologists for many years and on various projects across the country, as you can see from the little critter icons here on the map. And along each of our paths, we progress through our careers learning different research techniques and field skills and exploring different ecosystems. So just for fun and for a little bit of background, here's a taste of some of our previous work. So a lot of our previous work, and really wildlife research in general, involves live trapping animals so that we can place radio collars on the animals for tracking their movements. So here I am on the left setting a bobcat trap that's here in the Met How up on the loop. And on the right, we've got Anna setting a wolverine trap up in Canada. So sometimes being small helps in the field of wildlife research. Here's Anna and I on the left examining scat. Scat is always fascinating to wildlife biologists, and it's a really great research tool. We can learn a lot of stuff from scat, like what kind of animal has been eating. We can extract DNA samples from scat, so it's a really great tool for research. And then on the right there, that's Becca. She's setting a motion-triggered trail camera, and that's in the Badlands of South Dakota. She's working to monitor coyotes. It's not always pretty. There's Anna on the left. She is conducting a necropsy on a coyote, and she was able to tell from this necropsy that that coyote was killed by a cougar. And information like that can help biologists to understand the dynamics between species. And on the more lively side of things, there's Becca placing a collar on a bobcat so that we can track their movements and interactions with other animals. In the swamps of Louisiana many years ago, I was tasked with climbing giant cypress trees so that I could look down into the bear dens that they made in the hollowed out centers of the trees. That way I could count the bear cubs and we could track bear cub survival. And on the right, one of the perks of wildlife work, I got to be up close and personal with a little baby beaver while working on the Methow Beaver Project with Kent Woodruff, who some of you might know. He's a local, retired now biologist. On the left, here's a picture from a project where we were looking at pollution levels in songbirds in the Great Smoky Mountains as a result of mountaintop mining. And then there's Anna and her little sidekick, Rue, her dog, peeking over her shoulder. Anna's examining a deer hide for puncture wounds. Looking for these puncture wounds on a hide can help to determine how this deer died. Here's Anna again, small mammal trapping along the Columbia River. And here's Becca at a wolf kill site, and she's working to determine what other carnivores could be attracted to the carcass from the wolf kill for a free meal. Sticking out of that tube is the back end of a rattlesnake. This is a handling technique taught to me by local bios. Some of you might know them as well, John Rohr and Scott Fitkin. And then taking vital rates on an anesthetized wolf so that we can, again, place a radio collar on the wolf and monitor packs in Washington state. And as well as working on various projects with various animals all over the place, we've also worked in all seasons. So here's calling fawns in the beautiful sunny springtime to find out what their main causes of death are. And then there's Anna snowmobiling in freezing winter temps to reach a study site. That is frost that's completely covering her hair and hat. So those are a bunch of fun and silly photos of us working over the years, but wildlife science is something we were each taking really seriously as we navigated our careers. And so a few years ago, our paths finally all crossed for the first time here in the Methow when we worked together on a University of Washington carnivore project. And as Anna, Becca, and I got to know each other and share stories, we found that we had each arrived at similar conclusions as to what the field of wildlife conservation needs in order to make really meaningful headway in this fight to conserve species and keep ecosystems intact. And the three main needs that we saw are what now comprise the mission of Home Range. So first and foremost, with our natural world in crisis, we really need to focus on high quality research that addresses urgent and immediate needs. And to make this research the best that it can be, we need to ensure that the foundation of wildlife science, the data, is collected at the highest standard by helping to create a skilled and diverse field biologist workforce. And then finally, wildlife science that's conducted in a silo, unknown to the general public, is going to fall flat. So we believe in bridging the gap between wildlife science and our communities by involving the public in all aspects of conservation and the research process so that the science that's going on out there is understood, it's supported, and contributed to by the public, because only then with the support of our communities will the discoveries and the results of our research be fully adopted and applied to our landscapes and wildlife. So diving into the research prong of Home Range, As Anna, Becca, and I have worked various projects, we've noticed that while anything we can learn about our natural world adds to our bucket of knowledge that we base conservation in, some research is simply more directly applicable to wildlife conservation than others. So let me give you an example of an issue we think is super pressing and urgent. It's an issue each and every one of us here has experienced, and that was first really brought home to many of us in 2014 when the Carlton Complex fire broke out. And again, over the years, and yet again, this past summer when we had fires burning and pushing people out of their homes on both sides of the valley. Climate change is causing bigger, causing hotter, and more frequent forest fires. I'll never forget working in the woods up Twist River. I was collecting fecal samples from cows for a project that was looking at wolves and livestock on shared landscapes. And just as a little side story, I had to be able to match the scat sample with the cow's ID number, which meant I literally had to wait for and see a cow drop a patty and then run over, scoop it into a bag to be sent to the lab. So it's not all handling animals and listening for bird songs and looking for den sites and all that more glamorous type work. But anyway, I was sitting on this stump watching a little group of cows, just waiting for my next data point to drop when the light began to change. Smoke from a fire on the Chelan side was moving in and making what was a bright sunny day a thick, dark orange lighted day. And then ash started falling through the trees like gray snow falling from a brown orange sky. This kind of weather became more and more common as I started to get really curious about how increasing wildfires impact wildlife. One of the first things I found out was that we actually know surprisingly little about how wildfires affect wildlife. And for conservation in the West, this is hugely problematic. The already biggest agent of change to our landscape is rapidly growing, and we know only bits of how animals are affected by fire. So for example, lynx in Washington used to make up the largest population of lynx in the lower 48. Now our best guess is that we have well below 100 lynx. So this is a species that's really in danger of blinking out in our state. And this map gives us a big clue as to one of the factors that's contributing to low lynx numbers in Washington. The green areas show lynx habitat. You can see Twisp and Mazama there for reference. And then the red shapes are fires that have burned in the last 20 years or so. So much of lynx habitat in Washington has burned in the last 20 years, altering great swaths of their forested habitat. And so when your map of lynx range looks like this one, mostly burned, it's really urgent that we understand in detail how lynx respond to burned forests or to regrowing forests or to an island of unburned trees within a sea of blackened matchsticks. This is really important because without knowing what burned habitat is usable to lynx and what isn't, leaves forest managers in the dark about how to conserve lynx habitat in the face of increasing fire. Remember, we've got less than 100 lynx here in Washington, and climate-driven wildfires are ripping through their habitat at unprecedented rates. This is urgent. This is a conservation issue that we are going to find answers for at home range. So our natural world is in crisis, And we see this as an all hands on deck situation. So the kind of research that we're committed to conducting at Home Range is work like that Lynx work. It's work that addresses pressing and immediate needs and that directly translates to on the ground conservation action. And to us, an all hands on deck approach to conservation not only means conducting really solid science, it also means helping to foster excellent and diverse scientists. Because at the foundation of rigorous applied research is the data that we collect in the field. Locations from radio collars placed on animals, scat samples, bird counts, kill site information, camera trap photos. These are the types of data that we use in wildlife science. Now, the quantity and the quality of this data has a direct correlation to the caliber of resulting research. But to get top-notch data, we need a workforce capable of top-notch fieldwork. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna now, and she's going to talk about our training programs.
Thanks, Carmen. So Carmen just mentioned a workforce capable of top-notch fieldwork, and you'll hear us say that word a lot, fieldwork, in wildlife research. And maybe that's a term that when you think about it, what comes to mind is standing in a field of wildflowers, searching the opposite hillside for mule deer fawns, or counting songbirds along the edge of a pond in autumn, or documenting native shrubs on a leisurely hike. It might even be the privilege of holding your favorite animal's paw in your hand. And sometimes it really is like that. These are all photos that I took while performing wildlife research tasks in the field. But sometimes it's a lot more like this. Oh, come on, play. Well, there's a video. It seems to be buffering pretty hard. There we go. You son of a... Ah!
Great sound effects.
Yahoo!
Yay.
So that was me this past January surveying a road for carnivore scat. And what I thought might be a 3 or 4 hour day turned into 12 hours of navigating obstacles like down trees, these poor snow conditions. And because that happened to me like 5 or 6 times that day, I was eventually riding back to my truck by moonlight. And what that experience has in common with the more glamorous examples that I showed before is that they're all data collection. It's all part of the research that we do. Fieldwork is the equivalent of a scientist stepping into their lab, putting on their white coat and getting started on their experiment. But when you're studying wildlife, the only way to collect data is to become engaged with the natural world. It can be fun and funny and rewarding. It can also be dangerous and intimidating. So at the end of the day, this is what the data looked like. I was able to collect 6 scats, but it took 12 hours and a lot of work. Now, if you imagine a brand new biologist, they just graduated from college, they have a robust foundation of academic knowledge, they're excited to start their first field job, they have no experience, and they're expected to learn all the skills necessary for the fieldwork in just a few days of on-the-job training. So you send them out on a snowmobile like that with the mission of collecting scat. They may come home with the same data set, but it takes them twice as long. They had a hard day. They're really discouraged. They don't want to do that anymore. Or they may come home with no data at all. Because they ran into an obstacle that they didn't know how to overcome, or they found themselves in a situation where they felt it was dangerous and decided to turn around. Or worst case scenario, they don't come home at all that day. Maybe they damaged their snowmobile or became injured and couldn't make it back to the truck. Maybe the batteries in their GPS unit died and they didn't know how to navigate using map and compass. Now, these things happen even to trained biologists, but the more preparation and confidence we can provide to young biologists, the less risk we take by sending them out into the dynamic conditions that come with fieldwork. And with every field position that biologists take on, the skills build from foundational basics like driving a truck or riding a snowmobile to the more meticulous that you can see in this photo. Capturing and handling wildlife is a common tool used in research, and the task is often over-glorified and underestimated. So if you take an inventory of what's happening in this photo, we needed to capture this wolverine, which is a skill set all on its own. We needed to anesthetize him using potent drugs, monitor and record his vitals, place ear tags, apply a GPS collar, take body measurements, give him subcutaneous fluids, the list goes on and on. And these are all tasks that a veterinarian would normally perform if this were, say, your pet dog and not a wolverine. But they're tasks that are also regularly carried out by field staff that may have little to no experience when you're talking about wildlife research. And this type of trial by fire training that often happens, as you can imagine, can pose pretty serious risk to human and animal and your data alike. And so all of the skills that I've talked about so far are considered pretty standard for an entry-level biologist. But obtaining these skills often comes with economic sacrifice. And what I mean by that is, for example, while handling the wolverine in the last photo, I was being paid an average of $5 an hour. $5 an hour where I was expected to know all of those skills. I was expected to handle that animal, snowmobile, drive a truck, and do all of that safely and effectively. And low paying and volunteer opportunities like this are pretty typical in wildlife fieldwork. And as you can imagine, that creates a significant barrier for biologists that don't have the privilege of accepting financial risk in exchange for experience. The lack of accessibility to proper training, supportive networks, and valuable outdoor experiences broadens the already existing fracture that you could see here in the equity of our workforce, meaning wildlife research and the scientific community as a whole is missing out on some of the best and brightest would-be biologists. And so through these training courses at home range, our goal is to close that gap between skills necessary for fieldwork and the opportunities available to gain those skills. because we believe that impactful wildlife research starts and ends on the ground with high quality data collection and thoughtful conservation applications. And by teaching essential field skills to the next generation of biologists, we hope to foster a safer, more diverse, and more effectual workforce. And that workforce also includes our community. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Becca now, who's going to chat a little bit about our third focus. Becca, I think you might be muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Anna. So Home Range's third focus is outreach and community engagement, where an all hands on deck approach to conservation also means involvement from our communities. Community science, active outreach, and efforts to facilitate human-wildlife cohabitation are central to all of our research efforts as a result. So this past winter, as part of our work at the University of Washington, we worked in collaboration with the Met Howe Conservancy to conduct a community science initiative. This project introduced us to the power of community science, both as a means to collect valuable data to address wildlife research questions, but also as an invaluable way to connect people to their landscape. This project involved more than 40 dedicated volunteers here in the Valley that hiked, skied, and snowshoed 537 miles from January to March of 2020 to collect 230 scats, like the ones being deposited by these critters here, for a project that was investigating how coyote and bobcat densities vary in areas with and without wolf presence. So from a research perspective, the coolest part of this was the degree to which community science could impact the data being collected. Field crews hired on the project collected scat monthly along a set of transects, which are the red lines that you see here in this map. But going back to the challenges field crews face that Anna was just describing, our crews were small, had a lot of ground to cover every day, and needed to conduct a variety of field tasks. So we were generally limited to collecting scats along roadways that could be efficiently traveled by truck or snowmobile. And so we were unable to sample other really important travel corridors, such as trails and decommissioned roads that coyotes and bobcats regularly travel. Through our community science partnership, we were able to sample an additional 31 transects, which can be seen here by these blue pins. The addition of these routes allowed the project to sample nearly 150 miles of additional ground and greatly contributed to both the quality and quantity of data collected. This was the research impact, but the real impact of this project came as I heard amazing story after amazing story from folks about what they saw and learned in the field. Some folks realized that the majority of what they had once thought was dog poop littering a trail was actually coyote scat. Some followed tracks and came upon carcasses that had been killed and scavenged by the animals that they were trailing. And others explored corners of the valley that they had never seen before. This connection and understanding to our landscape is truly one of the most vital things we are doing for wildlife conservation right now. So using these same principles, Home Range is excited to keep both community science and community involvement at the core of all the research we do. Again, in partnership with our amazing friends at the Met Howe Conservancy, our first community science partnership is set to launch in June of 2022. This time focusing on black bears. Why black bears? Well, weighing in anywhere from 90 to 550 pounds, black bears are one of the largest carnivores that we share the landscape with. And because of their both opportunistic and omnivorous diet, they are also one of the carnivores that folks living near the wildland interface encounter most often. In addition, as a biologist, black bears hold a really special place in my heart, as they were the first animal that I studied. For this project here that you can see here in the photo, I was trapping and collaring black bears in Durango, Colorado, to help researchers understand how and why black bears used residential areas. We trapped most of our bears using a mix of both delectable and totally heinous baits. Everything from milk jugs stuffed to the brim with day-old donuts and expired fruit, to burlap sacks full of fermented fish. The fish bait was something special, and anybody that's worked with the stuff can attest to the fact that it more or less creates this uncontrollable desire to vomit. But the bears loved it, and as a result, fermented fish is what I ended up smelling like most of that summer. And somehow to this day, it holds sort of oddly nostalgic scent. One day, however, when I went for a post-work run, I encountered one of our collared bears along the trail. We saw each other, and the wind must have been blowing just the right way as I watched her sit down, raise her nose to the air, and wonder where the delicious rancid fish smell was coming from. This experience really drove home how reliant bears are on their noses and how much finding food, even rotting food far beyond its prime, much like what's sitting in each and every one of our trash cans, influences their behavior. So research conducted in this study in Durango found that climate change, human development, and natural food availability can all contribute to black bear use of human inhabited areas and elicit human black bear conflict. Some of the project's most interesting findings, in my opinion, had to do with natural availability. And this figure here sums up the findings well. So walking through a little bit, the figure on the left is a map of black bear use in a good natural food year. And the map on the right is black bear use in a poor natural food year, where blue is low use and red is high use. So as you can see, bears use the core of downtown Durango much more in poor natural food years. Natural foods, which here in the Met How primarily comprise wild berries from fruiting shrubs, are important for black bears as they pack on calories in preparation for their winter slumber. However, as summers in the Pacific Northwest get hotter and drier, the phenology and distribution of berry shrubs are changing. And in years where wild berry crops fail, shortages of these vital calories can increase a bear's willingness to navigate risks associated with human development to access anthropogenic foods, such as trash, orchard fruits, and bird feeder seeds. As a result, tracking natural food availability as a community can help us to better understand and mitigate black bear conflict in the valley. And next spring, we'll be recruiting community scientists to conduct berry walks, where data collected will contribute to both long-term study of black bear conflict mitigation here in the Met How and to inform research related to black bear ecology. But most importantly, this project aims to create a strong tie between black bear food needs and conflict in our backyard. So summing things up, Home Range is dedicated to conducting independent and collaborative wildlife research, offering practical field training opportunities for budding biologists, and involving the community in all aspects of our research, both to foster a deep connection between people and their landscape and to build empathy and local support for the wild places and animals we live among. We see the situation our wildlife is in as an all hands on deck issue. And so creating Home Range is us pushing up our sleeves and working hard to make the greatest conservation impact we can in this place that we call our home range. Thank you very much for your time and attention. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you all. That was amazing. So well thought out and beautiful presentations, each one of you. Let's see, somebody is saying a fabulous presentation in the chat, but if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, put yourself on gallery, we can see you all. That would be great. I'm curious, do you each of you have other jobs, or is this your full-time job?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, Carm. We do. Turns out that starting a nonprofit doesn't pay very well, so we each have a part-time job that kind of keeps us afloat, but we put a full-time effort into home range right now too. So yeah, kind of.
If people want to donate, can they just go to your website?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a donate page on our website, which is homerange.org. You can explore a little bit more about what we talked about and some of our ongoing projects there too. Yeah, and just around donations, our 501c3 status is pending at the moment, if that's important to you, but any donation is highly appreciated. So
Yeah, that's great. Well, I looked at your website and it's a beautiful website as well. Yeah, that was fascinating. Does anybody have any
Got a
questions?
question about bear tracking locally. I'm wondering if there's a database where people would be encouraged to report bear sightings so that there was a more general feel for where bears are at any given time and concentrations over time.
That's a great question, Peter. There does not exist something like that currently. As we continue to develop this black bear project, I think involving as much community data as possible is one of our long-term goals. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I think right now, tracking data might be really helpful. One thing that we're really excited about long-term is using camera traps a bit more widely throughout the valley too, to track use and behavioral patterns of bears.
David?
A very nice presentation. Thank you for presenting this to Meadow at home. I see your photos. Some of them are from Dave Moskowitz. You mentioned Kent Woodruff, Scott Fitkin, John Rohrer. How are you coordinating with other wildlife biologists in the valley?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked that, because it's another thing that's really important to us is that collaboration. So I started working for John and Scott and Kent over 10 years ago now, and we've they become mentors to us. And now, as John's getting close to retiring, he's actually on our board for Home Range. And so we've officially got him on board as a collaborator, but also we just, in general, think it's really valuable to be collaborating with our colleagues and getting their opinions and making sure that everybody feels like the work that we ultimately decide to do is work that is not only answering urgent and important questions, but work that the agencies are going to be able to translate to on the ground conservation and management. So we feel really lucky to be in a place with so many great other biologists that we are friends with, that we get together regularly with, just to talk shop and exchange ideas, and that we can go to when we have questions or things we want to collaborate on. We're really excited with the links project that we're developing, that we have a lot of really great researchers that are going to partner with us on this project, and namely Paul Hesberg, who is a really great wildfire researcher for the Forest Service research station out of Wenatchee. And so we're excited to work with him. And so, yeah, so basically that kind of collaboration and partnership and exchange of information is really important to us. We want to make this science the best that it can be. So that to us means bringing as many heads together as we can.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you currently have an office or a location where people can go to?
No, at the moment, we're all actually sitting in our own homes and kind of trade back and forth where we work every day. Yeah, that's a hope in the future, but.
Okay. So if someone were be interested in volunteering, even with the most menial of things, who would they contact and how would they go about that?
Yeah, so you could definitely contact any of us, and maybe Deirdre, you could send out our contact information after this, or on the website too. We have a form that you can fill out and let us know what you're interested in. And yeah, as these projects get up and running, we'll definitely have need for volunteer.
Okay, thanks.
I wonder if you've done any research on the pygmy rabbit, or it looked like it was going to go extinct here about when I was working 15 years ago or so. And where is it now? Any idea?
Oh, that's a great question. You must be did you work for the Forest Service or state, or you must be a biologist?
No,
Veterinarian.
Oh, a veterinarian.
no, I was just a volunteer. And we did a lot of
Yeah,
type of research, and I was just curious.
yeah.
Then I've heard that it's gotten worse and worse, and then there were fires. And so,
Right.
do you have any input at this time?
Pygmy rabbits are not a species that Becca and I have studied, but just, I'm afraid I don't have a whole bunch more intel than what you already know, which is that they are not doing great. And then the Pearl Hill fire, I know specifically burned a lot of their habitat. So, yeah, one of those pressing issues that needs some help for sure.
And how about links in the burned areas? Do you have any information to give any clue or where it's heading?
Yeah, so that is a lot of our focus is links in our burned areas, because like we saw on that map, most of their habitat is burned. And just from things that we have seen over the past couple of years out in the field, and actually some work that I previously did on links and fires, I think here in Washington State, there is some hope. I think that links are using burned areas sooner, and using different types of burns, low severity, medium severity, fire skips, edges, more than biologists previously knew. And so that gives me hope, because I think links are somewhat more flexible in what habitat they will use than we thought. And I think that they're out there right now making a living on our very fire impacted landscape. We just need to learn from them what the specific burned habitats are that they're able to use. That way we can conserve those. We can promote more of that. We can just better understand what lynx habitat is in the context of a very burned up North Cascades. So I think that there is some hope. It all depends on the kinds of fires that we're getting. Whether they're these just really climate driven, high severity, huge fires, or if we can treat our landscapes to try and bring back a more mixed severity fire regime that will give us a more textured burn scar with different types of habitats within it.
Well, as you know, of course, the lynx kind of depends on the snowshoe hare.
Exactly.
And, all these fires burn in a mosaic pattern normally. And so we have these patches of nice looking trees, and then absolute devastation next to it. And yeah, I would just be so interested in seeing how the snowshoe hares, if they will stay in these areas, or if it killed most of them or what. So
Yeah. Well, stay tuned.
yeah.
That's exactly what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any idea what the timeline is on your 501c3 status?
We applied for it back in August, and we've been told it can take anywhere from a few months to 18 months. And so I'm afraid that's all the information that the IRS has given us thus far. There may be I think we may have a fiscal sponsor that's coming into the works here shortly, that we may be able to route some funds through in order to get that tax deduction before we get our status.
Well, good luck with that.
Thanks.
Thank you. The other thing that we've learned is that we are we're operating as a nonprofit, and donations that are made as our application is pending, once our application goes through and we receive our status, those donations will be retroactively deductible.
I see Jack has raised his hand several times.
Yeah, I'm interested in how you guys, I think what you're starting out on is fantastic. Good luck with it. I'll help as I can, but I'm wondering how you're going to weigh in on controversial issues. Spring bear hunting, for example. How will you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one that we've talked about from the beginning, and have decided that we are scientists. We're not advocates. We're not here to. We're here to inform policy, but we want to stay firmly in a, following the science pathway, because that's our wheelhouse, and that's an important job. And it's important, we think, to have that clean split between an organization that is purely following science and conducting good science, so that there's no worry about bias or things like that. Yeah, we're here to conduct good science and present that good science, and hopefully it informs sound and meaningful conservation and policy and things like that.
I was wondering if you've reached out to the high school students or even elementary school students. I think if I had seen a slideshow like that when I was a little girl, that I would have been so inspired. I would have wanted to be a wildlife biologist for sure.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's definitely one of our biggest goals, and something that we're really excited about is long-term recruiting students from the high school to help as interns on some of these projects. There's really ripe opportunities for them to learn different stages of the scientific method, and just how conservation happens through the projects that we're doing. So it'll probably take us a year or so before we're ready to offer an internship opportunity like that, but it's something that we're thrilled to do. Yeah, just to get skills early on, take those into your future academic pathways, and hopefully bring them back to where you lived and grew up as well. So yeah, on our radar, and really excited about it.
Inspire them. Yeah, it's great.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're definitely open to presentations like this. This is great. So we've had a lot of people come to us with ideas that we're really excited about for presentations and ways to get involved. And as we kind of ramp up, it's just the three of us and our board of directors, which are kind of spread around the state. So we're really hoping to be able to meet demand for presentations and educational opportunities. So yeah.
All right.